OMORI just became
You're not
a
ready
manga.
for this manga
OMORI
based on a video game that hits you hard.
Christmas 2020 saw the release of OMORI, an indie RPG maker game created by artist become game developer OMOCAT as their first game. The game met critical acclaim for its handling of mental illness, friendship, forgiveness, and related topics. Fast forward to today, and reaping the rewards of OMORI's success, as well as perhaps feeling a little overconfident, OMOCAT announced and subsequently released an official serialized manga adaptation of the game. A new way to enjoy the beloved story, one that promises to attract both newcomers and old fans alike. Just one minor problem. It doesn't work. Conceptually. OMORI can only work as a video game. That's it. That's my argument. And hey, don't take my word for it, take it from OMOCAT herself.
But the more the story developed, the more the cutscenes came to me as game scenarios. The same thoughts kept occurring to me. This moment would work better as a game, or it would be better if the audience had a choice here.
Then what the— Manga adaptations of video games are nothing new. Before Pokemon had its first anniversary, it was already being adapted into a manga format. When adapting any kind of story, especially as drastically as this, the story must be altered to accommodate the change in mediums. In some circumstances, adaptations across mediums can be fine. Amazon Prime's The Boys is a recent example of how a new take on an old series can improve upon the original.
You are under a misconception.
However, good adaptations must offer something unique from their source material. The issue with OMORI is that its story, which is its most beloved aspect, is dependent on being told through a video game. As of the time of writing, the manga is not complete, but that does not matter. What I wish to convey through this video is that no matter how long the OMORI manga goes on for, or how you may feel about it, it is doomed to mediocrity.
You suck!
It has nothing to do with the execution, and everything to do with the concept. The number of changes necessary are not trivial. They are so numerous, as a matter of fact, that the final product you'd end up with is not a different way to experience the story. No, it's just worse. Manga and video games are two wildly different mediums. Manga is a fantastic medium and has excelled thanks to a long list of factors, but that is not the point of this video. Much of the hype surrounding the OMORI manga has been built off false expectations. The OMORI manga was never necessary, and nor is it a substitute for the original game, especially since many fans, who really should know better, mistakenly believe that unlike some similar-ish games, OMORI's story can supposedly be told outside of a video game.
I'm so glad you feel that way. Otherwise, I'd have dragged that here for nothing.
And although the original game isn't going anywhere, hopefully, it only goes to show how purposeless the manga actually is. But don't forget, the manga was made with the explicit intention of attracting new customers. This is especially problematic as there are many people who get turned away from games with long-ish runtimes, such as OMORI. Ergo, the real reason the manga exists is not an alternative way of experiencing the story, but rather a cash grab riding off the popularity of the source material. I am entirely confident in my argument here. This is not some long-winded rant about the OMORI manga or in my opinion. Oh no, that's not how we do things around here. I care not about convincing you. Everyone is free to have their own likes and dislikes. Rather, I'm here to prove a point. As you can tell by the sheer length of this video, I am going to meticulously, thoroughly, and concretely prove that the OMORI manga cannot work. Play the game instead. And I do mean play it. If you've watched a playthrough, you know who you are. That doesn't count.
No.
I love this game with religious zeal, and I know a lot of things about it. And this video has been in the works since the manga was announced, let alone released. And indeed, there is much to talk about here.
Why did you make me do this?
Now, I understand that nobody cares about this sort of stuff as much as I do, so for your viewing pleasure, I've partitioned this video into a table of contents. I do, however, encourage you to watch the whole thing. Oh, and spoilers for OMORI obviously, there's really no way I can avoid talking about them. Please enjoy. And without further ado, let's get down to business. Before I begin my argument proper, I would like to talk a little bit about what this manga is and my disdain for it. The astute among you may recognize this isn't the first time we've had an OMORI comic. Indeed, when OMORI was first conceived in 2011, it was originally a webcomic. As OMORI's popularity grew, it transitioned into a graphic novel. Unfortunately, very little of this project is publicly available, as it was abandoned in 2013. From then on, OMORI would be told through a game, with the story being overhauled through OMORI's long and messy development history. And as a disclaimer, I would like to point out that not all of OMORI was intentionally designed. OMOCAT did not work alone. OMORI is the collective work of many individuals with different ideas, and considering some of the developers, I'd say some things just turned out to be happy accidents. But I'm still going to be analyzing it as if everything was planned out, because the final product is the final product. And for what it's worth, OMOCAT seems to be proud of said final product. Which brings me to the manga. Whose idea was this? Third time's the charm, I guess, because on the 22nd of November 2023, OMOCAT officially announced that an OMORI manga adaptation was in the works, published by Kodansha and serialized in their sign-in monthly afternoon, with the mangaka going by the alias of... we'll get to them later. Contrary to popular belief, OMOCAT is closely involved with production alongside the mangaka. The commentary on the physical release of Chapter 1 confirms this, as well as supporting tweets. If you know anything about how OMOCAT works, this shouldn't come as much of a surprise.
I am their mom.
The first promotional material shown also displayed a different art style than what's seen in-game. Anyways, 3 months later, a small semi-animated teaser was revealed during the OMORI 3rd anniversary concert. Spring 2024 was promised as the release date. Towards the end of May, the date was confirmed to be June 25th, which, interestingly, is not in spring. Yeah, nice try. And also some birthday drawings too, who cares really. Unfortunately, physical copies are Japanese exclusive as of now. But fear not, because the official English digital manga releases a day earlier on the 24th, and oh, right. Well, I'm no stranger to this. By the way, K-Manga, the platform the English digital manga is hosted on, not only is it a US exclusive, but it uses a point-based system to read manga, and the reviews speak for themselves. Anyways, the 24th comes around and the manga is released, and let the clickbait begin.
The manga and game series that has saved many people's lives. I have personally never played myself. I do not own this game. I don't own it. I've never played it. The only thing I have really...
Now it's worth pointing out the sheer hype the manga received. Normally, when an adaptation of this magnitude is announced, there is some degree of backlash, but this never manifested. I was able to find some like-minded individuals at the time, but nobody ever listened to us.
Thank you!
It's comical to see the amount of blind faith people had, and to an extent, still do. Let them cook. At worst, people were cautiously worried, yet still excited.
So will there be anything new? Or will it just be a remake? What do you think?
I think it stinks!
Make no mistake though, I'm certain some people will retroactively claim that the manga wasn't needed, but it was unfathomably popular when it was announced. Look, if you were, or still are, excited, that's great. As for me though...
Oh no, this can't be.
Now, there's no shortage of YouTube videos which pretend to be objective when they're really not, so I want to make myself as transparent as possible. I am biased. I am a hater.
That is what I am!
And I am a gatekeeper.
Being a guardian of the gate doesn't mean you're supposed to open the gate.
Hateful does not even begin to describe how it felt over the past year.
Hate!
Every community has a type of person which either pretends to like the game or only likes a certain aspect of it. We are not the same. My frustration stems from the fact that I love this game unconditionally and will defend it at every angle, because it is just that good, which is why the manga is so perplexing to me. I do not wish to antagonize anyone with this video, but I do strongly believe that people have their priorities in the wrong order. People should not be grateful for new content. If you've paid for OMORI, then you don't owe OMOCAT anything. I am of the opinion that unnecessary content is almost always bad content, and you should be as well. Nobody is infallible, and even franchise creators make mistakes and should be held accountable. Don't deify OMOCAT, this is all just business. As of the time of writing, the manga, rather predictably so, has received a mixed response.
It's the biggest piece of dog.
Quote-unquote major problem with the manga isn't necessarily any one big thing. It's just a lot of small things that shake up the foundation of the story and make fans ask if it's gonna be able to deliver a good story.
The most evident difference when comparing OMORI as a game and its manga adaptation as of now is the reordering of events.
Oh boy, do I have a lot to tell you. People have been on some quality copium, and while this has been really funny to watch, I am not here to hate on the official manga per se. Right now, people are critiquing superficial things, such as the art and story. These can change on the fly. Consequently, people still believe in the lie that an OMORI manga can work. I'm here to tell you the truth. Let's imagine a hypothetical OMORI manga adaptation. We can call it OManga. OManga is your perfect manga adaptation for OMORI. Its art, handling, characterization, action, and story are all exceptional, all the while being a faithful adaptation. So, would OManga be good? No. And to prove that, I'm going to be focusing on this hypothetical manga from here on. I'll address my thoughts on the actual manga later. Okay, one last thing before we begin. I would like to take a moment to discuss the mangaka of the OMORI manga.
What? Who is that?
This is off topic, so if you don't care, skip here. Noika, let's just call him Bob. Now, a lot of people don't like Bob, but like, what took you guys so long? You people had almost 7 months to investigate them, and you're angry? Now? But let's back up a bit. When the OMORI manga was first announced, Bob was likewise revealed as its corresponding illustrator. Strangely though, Bob's Twitter account was seemingly created just for the manga, and OMOCAT never once elaborated on who Bob was, or their background. So many people assumed them to be an anonymous artist. Now, for whatever reason, the OMORI community at large struggled to find information about Bob.
I did a bit of research, but I couldn't find anything about him.
I, however, have a working internet connection. Now, I did research on Bob all the way back in April, and it's a good thing I did because a lot of the stuff I've found has since been deleted. And believe me, I went pretty far. I am now in a position where I know more about this person than anyone else, so allow me to tell you exactly who they are. Speaking purely of credentials here, Bob does have the necessary qualifications for a project of this caliber. This is not their first work, and they have participated in professional collaborations, such as music videos, which I will deny go kinda hard. They had 2 additional Twitter accounts, now defunct, as well as a presence on other social media sites. Thanks to the Wayback Machine, reposts, and other such archives, a lot can be unveiled about their work before it was deleted. Now, I have to be careful of what I say, as Big Brother is always watching. So instead, I'll just put it on the screen for you to read.
That's it?
Now for me, this is all really funny to uncover. OMOCAT cannot escape the allegations no matter how hard she tries. They were already in hot water for this kind of stuff, so I have no idea what they are thinking. Considering much of Bob's profile was deleted in the months leading up to the release of the manga, it's safe to assume this was a way of saving face. I predicted that once knowledge of Bob's past reached critical mass, people would boycott the manga. And I was right. In particular, it was this ragebait tweet that did the job. Now, if your first response to hearing all of this drama was to drop the manga, well...
I'm sorry to hear that. I was hoping you'd stay.
There seems to be a lot of misplaced anger, so I'll enlighten you by saying that this is a nothing burger of a controversy. A Tuesday for the manga industry, if you will. Kota Hirano, the author of Hellsing, my beloved, originally drew inappropriate manga. Hajime Isayama, of Attack on Titan fame, has been criticized for a certain character being based on a certain person. Boichi, fan service to oblivion. This guy's an actual criminal. Go Nagai? I mean, the jokes write themselves. Do I even need to mention early Dragon Ball? Even if you think these examples are cherry-picked, this speaks nothing of the sheer volume of manga and webcomics released in Japan on the daily. Twitter really is an amazing site. It's outstanding how many people live in a bubble and will publicly humiliate themselves. I mean, the fact that the tweet that revealed all this drama had content warnings is proof enough of that fact.
You wanna
Cancel
him? Go ahead. Who cares?
OMOCAT doesn't care. Bob doesn't care. I don't even think they speak a word of English, and Japan certainly doesn't care either. Manga is big business, people. They're not going to cancel it just because some people in the West got upset. Don't twist my words here. In no way am I condoning Bob or their works, but they drew commissions for a market that wants it. That is nothing out of the ordinary for digital artists. It's all kind of sad, really. Because apart from the people who are desperate for attention, you also have people who seem to be genuinely upset about this.
You figured it out too late.
Of course people would be upset, because the OMORI manga will always be disappointing. It's not meant to be, so don't misunderstand it. My disdain for the OMORI manga is not so shallow as to be described by petty drama. I couldn't care less about who the mangaka is. Could be you, could be me. I will hate the manga regardless. Because the truth is, the manga was rigged from the start. Allow me to begin with my strongest argument. This, after all, was the same reasoning OMOCAT had when designing this game. OMORI's main protagonist, Sunny, is a silent protagonist. His character, as well as the story as a whole, only works in combination with this fact. In general, immersion is a critical component when discussing protagonists for story-based games. You want to feel as if you are the character that you're playing.
Arkham Asylum makes you feel like you're Batman.
Silent protagonists, for all their flaws, act as great conduits for the player, precisely because they don't talk. That is why they tend to fill the role of self-insert characters. Hence, OMORI's story is fixated around Sunny, his journey, his relationship with his friends, his fears, and his choices. Ergo, it's the player's journey, the player's relationship with her friends, the player's fears, and the player's choices. With that in mind, Sunny is not a self-insert. To explain away the necessary player-character interaction vital for OMORI storytelling to function, being silent is part of Sunny's personality. RPG conversation, be it talking to an NPC or what have you, is inherently one-sided. This means that instead of a conversation between two ordinary characters, it's a conversation between one character and the player, helping us with immersion. This is particularly useful as OMORI sets up mysteries for the player to unravel. Early on, we learn about his friends, as well as something more sinister that seems to be haunting him. Sunny discovers said mysteries alongside the player, and they are tied to his past. To name but one example, would be the reveal that Sunny's sister, Mari, is dead. The player is first introduced to Mari when playing as OMORI in Sunny's dreams, but when exploring the real world, Mari is curiously absent. The player naturally tends to ponder about where Mari is. The game toys with this idea, only later explicitly revealing that she is in fact dead. This furthermore adds additional context to the weird horrific monsters we've been seeing, and the story snowballs from there. Immersion also assists with attachment, that is to say, the player growing fond of their controlled character. Sunny is a character who has done unspeakable things in the past, and the narrative of the game emphasizes the importance of forgiveness. Ergo, the player needs to forgive Sunny as well. Think about why you can name Sunny in the first place. People often put in their own names here. Then we approach the intersection of Sunny's character and the RPG mechanics of the game. For starters, OMORI, from its inception, has featured a colorful world ripe for exploration. When exploring or fighting, it's about where you want to go and what you want to do. This once again contributes to immersion. But it runs deeper. OMORI knows it's an RPG and cleverly exploits that fact. Early into the game you can explore Sunny's house, only for him to tell you, no. Interesting. I wonder what this has to say about his fears. Before you can wake up for the first time, you're stranded in the game's first area, white space, with no clue as to how to exit, only for you to spot the stab option in the menu. The game forces you to do something you might find uncomfortable, as well as adding additional intrigue to Sunny's mental state. On the first night, you're prompted to open the door for Mari. If you do, you'll be greeted with a scare. This plays into a similar such scene later in the game, where you're prompted to open the same door for your friend, Kel. Much like last time, you don't know whether he's actually there or not. If you do open it, not only is the player experiencing the outside world for the first time, it's also Sunny's first time in 4 years. The game betrays its RPG formula, as if the player walks into the world or daydreams, the game won't behave as expected. RPG battle mechanics such as fighting and defeating enemies now suddenly don't work as well, tricking the player into hurting their friend, Aubrey.
Whoa.
Sunny will even hallucinate and can fool the player into believing his imaginary characters are real, again revealing Sunny's deteriorating mental state. And lest we forget, the player is in full control of the story. Whether Sunny confronts his fears or not, or lets certain characters die, is up to the player, acting on behalf of Sunny. Player choice was an intentional decision by OMOCAT, and that prospect of choice is leagues more important to his character than simply being an observer, like in the manga. In truth, this topic deserves its own video, and I've only talked about Sunny, never mind OMORI. But what I am trying to say is that the story of OMORI, which is fixated around its main character, was designed to be linked with us, the player. This character, which works so effortlessly in a video game, is nowhere near as elegant in all manga. With the audience now being an observer instead of in control of Sunny's actions, the elements of his character developed through RPG mechanics are lost completely. And though body language and facial expression does help, which is something RPG Maker was limited in its ability to convey, it's not a replacement for immersion.
It just feels more immersive to be able to see the reactions of our protagonist to the crazy things happening around him.
Interesting, yes. Immersive, not at all. His one-sided character interactions, which were previously not a problem, now present a serious issue. When your main character can barely interact with its supporting cast, it's not a good sign. Manga Sunny is inherently boring to watch because his actions lack any sort of context. No longer does the player decide Sunny's actions, now he is simply a zombie to the plot, all the while saying nothing. This is not the fault of the mangaka. Sunny's character is simply incompatible with any kind of manga adaptation. There are only two paths for his character. A. Stay true to his personality and have him not speak, or only in minute amounts. This seems to be the route the actual manga is taking, but as already discussed, Sunny becomes a shadow of what he is in the source material. B. Have him speak. This would once more recontextualize his actions, but it would also destroy his character in the process. For a traumatized shut-in, his character needs to reflect that, and him talking profusely doesn't bode well. Worse still, having Sunny speak just sort of breaks much of the dialogue of the story, as it was meant to tell the player information, not the other way around. Either way, it's a lose-lose situation. There probably is a middle ground here, and Sunny should speak in some capacity to give the manga a fighting chance. But regardless of how you write this character, it will always come short to how he's portrayed in the source material. He is a beautiful character, but keep him where he belongs. It's hilariously ironic that the OMORI Manga, a story told through a medium devoid of sound, was advertised in the OMORI 3rd anniversary concert. Unlike an album, which is a standalone piece of music from an artist, video game soundtracks, as the name suggests, are meant to accompany a video game. Music is a useful tool in storytelling for a variety of reasons, and OMORI takes advantage of this. The soundtrack of OMORI breathes plenty of life into the game and contributes greatly to the game's many emotional heights. Need I remind anyone that the climax of the game revolves around a duet? Yeah, just remove the music from that. I'm sure it'll hit the same. Even if you are willing to make the far-fetched excuse that you can simply listen to the game's soundtrack while reading, I mean that's just some serious cope. Oh, and last I checked, physical copies don't come attached with MP3 players. OMORI is not the same without its soundtrack. This is not a far-fetched argument. I'm sure anyone can understand that losing access to the soundtrack will dampen the story a bit. And people did voice concern about it, but I mean, it can't be that bad, right? Give the soundtrack some credit. So then, I would like to demonstrate just how vital OMORI's soundtrack is for orchestrating its story. When thinking of OMORI's soundtrack, it's easy to think of the most memorable songs among them. You Were Wrong, Go Back. Ready, Steady, Go. Jawbreaker. It Means Everything. My Time, World's End Valentine. These are all amazing songs, but they're all largely boss themes, ergo they can be excused from the story. But OMORI's soundtrack is comprised of 179 songs in total, and there's a lot more going underneath the hood than just energetic boss themes. So instead, let's talk about association. I'm going to play a few tracks from OMORI, and I want you to guess what area in the game they're played in. Here are the answers. If you got them all right, then that's association at work. You associate the song you're listening to with a given moment from the game. Considering that OMORI is a game with a vibrant world, this does wonders in making each area stand out. Association is also a particularly useful narrative device when discussing leitmotifs. Leitmotifs are recurring musical compositions, and in lieu of their recurring nature, they lend themselves well to stories such as OMORI. For example, take this song. If you've played the game, I'm sure you recognize it. This is Mari's theme, ergo the player associates this song with the character. Now, turn your attention to this song. This is an entirely different track from the OST, but it's still Mari's theme. By this point in the story, the player knows that Mari has passed away, so hearing a somber rendition of her theme places greater weight onto the tragedy of her death. Let's listen to another example. This is Basil's theme. In the OST, there are 4, technically 5, different renditions of the same theme. The song is also strongly associated with Basil's photo album. It plays when you first reorganize the photo album. It plays again when you first discover the real photo album and understand that the friend group split apart. It will still play again, and pretty creepily so, when the player discovers the not-so-happy photos, and once more it will play when reminiscing over childhood memories for one last time. Consistently, the song plays during the game's heaviest moments, and it carries weight because of it. Oh, and let's not forget the main theme of the game. This is the first thing you hear when you boot up the game. It is also associated with Mari, and, well, I don't think I need to explain this one. Which brings me to my next point. Tone. OMORI is a story with many happy moments and many sad moments, and the music reflects this. Stardust Diving is a cheerful song. It plays when you're on an adventure with your friends. Lost Library is a somber song played when discovering forgotten childhood memories with your friends. And never mind the horror songs. I, of course, could go on, but the tone behind parts of OMORI is greatly influenced by the game's soundtrack. Now, did you understand all of that? Great. That's the part most people already know. Because paradoxically, OMORI's soundtrack is at its best when it's at its simplest, or when it isn't used at all. If you've played Yumi Nikki, you'll be familiar with the idea of music contributing to atmosphere. Atmosphere is a term discussing the general feel of a game, and while it can be constructed without music, music certainly plays a pivotal role. Black Space in OMORI pays homage to Yumi Nikki, and, like its predecessor, makes use of short looping tracks to create a general feel. Uniquely, an important part of the game's soundtrack, those played in Black Space, was created before the level design, and consequently, the levels are meant to reflect the music, not the other way around. Generally speaking, these tracks are meant to be creepy, but it's not totally meaningless. Black Space is an area which explores the trauma and guilt of the main protagonist, and the music plays into this. Hearing something tell the player, "I love you" with a somber piano playing. Seeing Mari's corpse hanging with melancholic background music. The incredibly depressing guitar track in the Black Forest, Black Space is one of the saddest portions of the game thanks in no small part to music. It's also worth addressing sound design. The truth sequence, the most important part of the game, takes enormous advantage of sound. The suspense is carried out by sudden loud noises, parts which are quiet, parts which are loud, parts which are uneasy, And best of all, when there's no sound at all. OMORI also uses ambience. This is most notable when the player explores their own house. As opposed to the happy tunes in Headspace, the game's dream world, Sunny's house is eerily quiet with a soft ambience. It's meant to feel unwelcoming, perfectly encapsulating Sunny's desire to spend her time dreaming instead. Another example would be when the player first goes outside, but joyful music only plays when the player has been briefed about major plot revelations. Up until then, it's quiet, again creating suspense and contrasting Headspace greatly. Now, was that a lot? I hope so, because music and sound moreover are important. Very important. And this importance is lost of any manga adaptation, and by consequence, manga will be inherently more limited in its approach to tell its story. Did people really expect that nothing would change? That you can simply remove sound from a story, one which was clearly designed to take advantage of sound, and everything would just work?
Stop it!
Go ahead, play the game muted. I promise you it'll be a lackluster experience. This is a weakness, full stop. Make no mistake, manga have done exceptionally well without needing to rely on sound. But again, we're adapting OMORI here. To suggest that all manga can magically adapt and replace all the nuances that sound offers is utterly ridiculous. Manga is famous for its black and white illustrations. There is no rule stipulating that manga need not be in color. Many manga are, or at least partially in color, but in addition to being a stylistic choice, black and white is faster to produce and cheaper to print. It goes without saying that all manga isn't necessarily condemned to be colorless. Even the first chapter of the digital manga had color on 2 pages. But again, manga are typically black and white. Digital colorings, of course, will be made, but it's worth pointing out that manga first and foremost are meant to be viewed on a page, not on a screen. It's a little naive to think that color can simply be stripped from a story and expect nothing to change. Including color in a visual story, such as OMORI, is not a trivial decision. Of course, manga as a medium has excelled without using color, so why is this such a problem for all manga? OMORI was not made to be black and white. Remember, this is an adaptation of an already colored story. Manga, real manga, are made colorless from the ground up. Before we address why OMORI can't be colorless, let's first understand why colorless manga even work to begin with. And I can name no better example than a series named after the color white. Bleach features a wide range of characters, worlds, and dramatic fight scenes, and the way it conveys these elements is through the strong contrast provided by the colors black and white. The characters, which are the focus of the reader's attention, always have strong silhouettes, making them easily recognizable. All major characters have unique body sizes, hair, and facial features to make them stand out even when wearing the same uniform. The good guys wear black, the bad guys wear white. It's very easy to tell them apart. More nuanced designs cleverly use black and white as part of their color scheme, as to direct the reader's attention to certain parts of the body. Character transformations sometimes invert the color palette, rendering them even more striking. Backgrounds are usually kept to a minimum as to not distract the reader from the characters, but they're still detailed when they need to be. Certain areas within the story, such as Hueco Mundo, use black and white as a stylistic element, with the ground being a bright white and the sky being a solid black. Now contrast this with OMORI. Even in the original style, body proportions are incredibly similar. Everybody has same face syndrome with ordinary character design. Because of RPG Maker, expression is relegated to portrait boxes. Even the sprites are all very samey. OMOCAT style is so generic, as a matter of fact, that people have made clickbait videos and pick crew generators, and it fits the bill pretty well. But OMORI circumvents these shortcomings due to a couple of reasons. Firstly, the number of main characters are small, only the important ones have portrait boxes anyway. In manga, where even the side characters must be drawn, well, you can see the problem. Secondly, and what I mainly wish to focus on, is color. Take the difference between Headspace characters and their faraway counterparts. Their designs are extremely similar, intentionally so that the player recognizes them. Color, then, is the differentiating factor. In Headspace, your friends are white and purple. In the real world, far away down, they have realistic color palettes. For certain characters, color is a defining aspect of their design. Aubrey, for instance, has pink hair, a symbol of her delinquency. It stands out, and it's even tied later in the game when a younger Aubrey says that she wants to dye her hair with Mari. This design element is entirely lost in manga because her hair will always be white, black, or gray. Worst of all are Sunny and Omori, the game's main protagonists. Omori is strictly black and white, whereas Sunny isn't. And, oh my god, I cannot tell them apart. How did people think this was a good idea? So why not just redesign the characters to better fit a manga format? The fact that this can be contemplated at all is indicative that a manga should not be attempted. But, okay, sure. Characters aside, you must then address how color is used in the rest of the game. Instead of listening to me, why don't you listen to OMOCAT herself? She gives plenty of examples, so I'll speed it up a bit. In order to develop very different identities for all of Omori's worlds, I used very different colors for each world, a dreamy palette for Headspace, a more realistic color scheme for Faraway Town, and dark intense colors for Black Space in the fear sequences. To further give each subworld their own unique identity, the areas in Headspace were all tied to different main color schemes, green for Vast Forest, purple for Otherworld, pink for Sweetheart's Castle, and so on. Color is not just a way to develop direction, but also can be used as an effective way to guide a player or convey emotions to them. For example, you may have heard that most fast food chains use the color red in their logo because it makes you hungry, or that the reason traffic cones are bright orange is because your eyes naturally take note of it. In the same way, light and pastel colors are typically soft and soothing, so adding contrasting bits of scary events across a dreamlike headspace makes the place feel more uneasy. Part of your brain is thinking, this should be peaceful, but it's not. On the other hand, saturated and dark colors can produce more intensity. In Deeper Well, the area before Humphrey, the colors suddenly become dark, neon, and alien-like. This was done because the NPC dialogues in the area become much more introspective, so the player needs a cue to sense that the mood of the game is shifting and become more serious. Of course, the music helps with this too. As another example, the combination of red and black is the most intense and usually used to convey something evil or sinister. Because of this, scenarios with the fears along the staircase were originally going to be red and black. However, I wanted to use the color palette sparingly and save it for scenes where the game would be the most intense, like Omori's red hand sequence and the final battle. Now, she talks a bit more, and I can name more examples as well, but you get the picture. When you only have black, white, and grey to work with, Omori's story becomes quite literally dull. Most important of all, the ability to convey tone is hampered. Instead of explaining how, I think it's better to just show you.
All hail Plankton!
Yeah. The most obvious example of how the game does this would be how the game quite literally gets darker during serious moments. Another example would be that towards the end of the game, warmer colors are used to relax the player as they explore the last of Sunny's memories. Coupled with the music, it's a heartwarming moment that prepares the player for the final boss. Lastly, color can be used as a focal point. Look no further than manga music videos. A bit of color pairs well to black and white. In the game, this principle is used best during the truth sequence. The color red in particular is used carefully. Bloody footprints on a dark background, the red sky, the red background of the photo album, the glowing red windows, the player character becoming colored in blood, it all contributes to the uneasiness of the scene. Now, I oversimplified a lot, and in truth, an entire video can be made on this topic. I haven't even touched on how color can be used stylistically. You may think this is just overanalysis, but you have to expand your horizons a bit. Color is important and it should not be underestimated. Omori was made with this fact in mind, even when it was a webcomic. To remove it is by extension remove a portion of Omori's storytelling. So, since you're already playing the game muted, while you're at it, apply a monochrome filter too. Omori needs color. Let's talk about the actual game part of Omori now. Liar! There's a lot to cover, so let's first discuss interactivity. Interactivity is what makes video games unique as a storytelling medium. The action the player takes will impact how they perceive the game and its story. I feel as if many fans have a sort of amnesia where they only remember the important story moments of the game, not everything leading up to it. What I want you to do is go to the Omori wiki and just read. Just read through it, and look how detailed each area of the game is and how much the player is allowed to do. Throughout an RPG, you'll almost always be doing one of three things: exploration, reading dialogue, for engaging in combat. In Omori's case, none of these translate well into a manga. But let's first focus on exploration. Exploration is inherently interactive within a video game, and since Omori is rather big for an RPG Maker game, exploration does take up a significant portion of the game's runtime. Recall that being able to explore Omori's world was an explicit design choice OMOCAT had when creating this game. Notice how the player only takes up a small portion of the screen, the rest is dedicated to the environment at hand. Both Headspace and Faraway Town are large and offer plenty for the player to do. In a manga, all environments must be drawn, but there's only so much information that can be conveyed this way. A book may be more descriptive and give more information to the reader that they otherwise would not have known, but it won't be as visually impressive. A video game, on the other hand, makes the best of both worlds. In Omori, you walk up to something, you read about it, and repeat. This is done hundreds of times throughout the game. It's so natural, but I haven't seen anyone else bring this up. But a lot of information is conveyed this way. Something important to note is that the narration throughout the game always uses second-person pronouns such as you and your. In Sunny's house, towards the end of the game, it will switch to first-person pronouns I and me. It's a sweet moment and adds context to his character, almost as if the relationship between him and the player is important. There are also moments where interactivity and player choice are necessary for the story to present itself effectively. I've already discussed this when going over Omori's Silence Protagonist, so I won't bear repeating them here, but one example I'd like to shine light on is when the player reaches Mari's grave. As OMOCAT herself explains, quote, I wanted the moment to be something the player chose to do themselves. Ultimately, I decided that leaving the cemetery scenarios to be discovered instead of required would make those moments feel more special to the players who found them. Unquote. Omori is so much more than just its main plot. Every good story is. Which brings me to the elephant in the room, Headspace. I love Headspace, and when adapting Omori, Headspace comes up as a problem as it is gameplay centric, with the main plot moving along when the player wakes up.
Omori is also not a short game, so I wonder if it's going to be multiple volumes or just one big graphic novel. To be fair, there is a lot of filler from the game that can be cut from.
You make my blood boil.
There's been a revisionist narrative going around, and not just with Omori, that if something doesn't immediately move the plot forward, it doesn't matter. Filler is one of those words that have lost their meaning as it's unbelievably overused. Look, like it or not, Headspace is not filler, although some parts certainly are weaker than others. From the beginning, Omori's mission statement has been about exploring a world of imagination. Despite the game's many revisions over the course of its development, this much has remained consistent. Most of the player's time is spent here, and our information about the characters first and foremost comes from here. When you consider the sheer amount of content placed here, and the fact that more of it was added in the console release, the developers want you to spend time here. Once interactivity is removed from the equation though, Headspace does genuinely become filler. Portions of the story will offer little to the reader. This was fine when it was a video game and there was a world to interact with, explore, do fun stuff. Ergo, manga is in a tough spot, where a significant portion of what makes Omori is just not compatible with a manga adaptation. That is probably why in the manga so far, they haven't even bothered with sticking to an accurate portrayal of events. I'm not quite done talking about Headspace just yet. But suffice it to say, if you think you can invalidate most of Omori and expect the story to be the same, if not better, then perhaps you're not using most of your brain either.
Woo, feeling good!
Content merely describes how much stuff there is to do or see within the game. Though more gameplay content is useful to the player, not everything is particularly useful for the sake of a manga adaptation. Omori has, I'd wager, around 30 hours worth of content. That's a low ball, and your total playtime will likely be much higher if you're trying to 100% the game. What I wish to emphasize is just how much needs to be cut or changed, lest the story be bloated. Obvious stuff like tutorials and quick time events are gone, so that's most of the prologue right off the bat. Headspace, as already mentioned, is completely wrecked, but other parts of the game share the same fate. Optional dialogue, quests, fights, areas, etc. are RPG main staples. If the player isn't interested, they don't have to engage with them. Manga, on the other hand, are linear by nature. Either something is drawn, or it isn't. This is the most prevalent of an issue within the faraway town portions of the game, as this is where the earthbound influence of Omori shines through. The stuff that can be done here is all lighthearted and wacky, but it does a good job at contextualizing the world behind Omori. There's also plenty of character interaction and overall fun to be had. But the plot is also most important during these segments of the game, so if the player isn't interested, they can simply skip most of it. Manga cannot do this. Now, Omori also has more than one major route the player can choose to take. There is the true route that most people are familiar with and the direction the manga seems to be taking, as well as the neutral route, also known as the Hikikomori route, or just Omori route for short. I'm going to make a safe bet and say most of you watching have not played the Omori route, which is a shame. Unlike the true route, this route is entirely gameplay focused, but it's still the same game and the same story. I could always see this being adapted as a completely original story, which is fine, but the fact that this needs to be considered at all is evident that a manga adaptation isn't the best idea. All the nuances Omori provides are simply flatlined into one linear approach of the story. The only solution I can think of are pointless spin-off novels. There's nothing inherently wrong with a manga adaptation creating new content to replace incompatible content, but again, most of the game is incompatible. You must consider all of this when adapting Omori. It's not always about the main plot. The player is doing so many other things, and it's what makes Omori, well, Omori. It's a big world. Being an RPG is part of its character. It's something that OMOCAT shows over something akin to a point-and-click story. This is a big one. Omori's turn-based combat system can be a deal-breaker for many, not to mention the general pace of the game. I mean, who even likes it anyway? Me. I like it. Let's face it, Omori isn't winning any awards for its combat system, but unlike some Omori fans, I actually enjoy the games that I play. It is true that Omori's saving grace is its story, but I've seen a few people that overcompensate and try to argue that it's somehow detrimental to the overall experience. Listen, I'm sorry RPG Maker games aren't your forte. Some go above and beyond, but speaking from personal experience, most suck. Oh, I'm well aware Omori's combat system is unbalanced and flawed, but guess what? Every RPG is unbalanced and flawed. If it's really that hard for you to complete Omori due to its gameplay, which is adorable by most JRPG standards, refer to the Subway Surfers footage in the bottom right corner to retain your fleeting attention span. Regardless, manga is not an RPG nor turn-based, so adapting Omori presents a unique challenge. The route many adaptations take is to simply portray RPG fights as action sequences. This is the faithful approach, but it is undeniably boring. There's a lot more to a good fight than just looking cool. The fight itself needs to be interesting and keep the audience invested. There should be context and stakes to the fight, emotional investment, plot ramifications, and sometimes a power system to make the fight more interesting. Does this all sound like Omori? Omori is not a f***ing shonen, people. Am I really supposed to be excited about Omori fighting sprout moles? All a manga does is expose how rudimentary these fights are. This doesn't matter in the game. Your investment in the fight is tailored to the game mechanics. If you lose, you get a game over. The alternative approach is to not bother with fights. But again, most of the game is just this, especially headspace. With all these blind spots, hopefully you're starting to see just how incompatible Omori is with a manga adaptation. But we're not done just yet. Alright, I hope you've paid attention up until now because this is what all my gameplay talk has been leading up to. Chapter 1 of the manga was criticized for having terribly fast pacing, and although that is true, the reality is that this was always going to be a problem. The strength of a manga comes in the way it portrays its story through its art. After all, it's a comic, not a traditional novel. And part of that strength relies on how easy it is to get into. You can read manga from almost anywhere. It's why comics are placed in magazines. Video games, on the other hand, tend to demand much more of your attention, especially Omori. Don't forget that many people read manga adaptations of video games precisely because they are faster. Regardless of how you feel about the game's pacing, the reality is that Omori is not out of line with other long RPGs, particularly JRPGs. These games are long, their stories are nuanced and gradually built up. They have enormous areas for the player to interact with, and they're all very wordy. This is a serious problem for all manga. Manga is built off pictures. Even the most slice-of-life manga aren't strangers to depicting action. but when you're forced to adapt the game with an encyclopedia's worth of text, something has to make way. I'll use the first chapter of the OMORI Manga to illustrate my point, as it helps that some of the dialogue is ripped one-to-one from the game. Only counting speech bubbles and nothing else, I counted 1,011 total words over 54 pages for an average of 18.7 words per page. Give or take, I might have miscounted a few. Ignoring the contents of the page, this number is to be expected. There are portions of the chapter which focus on action, and others which focus on dialogue. It's best not to overwhelm your readers with too much text. By comparison, the mandatory dialogue in the game's first area with its main cast, Neighbor's Room, totals 241 words. That's nearly a quarter, and that's only the mandatory dialogue for the first room.
You never think these things through.
It's an RPG, you're meant to read a lot. I think people forget just how wordy this game is, and when you factor in description text and optional text, the amount of text in the game simply balloons in size. For the manga to keep up and not be dreadfully boring, it needs to cut down on the number of words, so as not to move at a snail's pace.
It's so basic.
Now, perhaps you're still not convinced. Well, let's revisit the points I brought up earlier with interactivity, cut content, and action. Already, most of these are rendered useless for a manga adaptation. When talking about cut content specifically, it's not always just about optional stuff, but also mandatory parts of the game. An easy example would be the photo album. It's an important plot device and allows a player to grow attached to the game's main cast. You will have multiple opportunities to look through it and rearrange it. Although these minigames are tedious, they are necessary for drilling the importance of the photo album into a player's head. Recall all the time spent exploring and fighting. These take up much of your time and are crucial for fleshing out a world which is beyond the main plot. This is applicable both to Headspace and Faraway Town. If these are not minimized in the manga, it will be slow. However, the most disproportionately affected parts of the game are its dungeons. If they are as slow as they are in the game, they are purposeless without the interactivity the game provides. This holds true in many RPGs, not just OMORI. This all contributes to the pacing of the story being wildly thrown off. Don't be surprised if it's going a little too fast for your liking. But recall, that's how these stories work. They're a slow burn, lots of dialogue and character interaction, but ultimately providing a high payoff. I've only really seen this type of storytelling critiqued by those who constantly need stimulation to keep themselves entertained. Take your time. If the manga is going to have any chance of standing apart from its source material, horror is the way how. Horror lends itself well to a manga. The high contrast of black and white and the detailed illustrations can paint a disturbing picture. Famous examples include PTSD Radio and Uzumaki. The official manga, in what little we have of it so far, has indeed been praised for its horror panels, and I do hope that these panels become more frequent. The psychological horror aspect of OMORI is but a fraction of the game, yet it's notably important. But don't confuse spooky drawings with being an adequate replacement for what the game offers. Horror overlaps greatly with what I've discussed already: music, color, and interactivity. Music and color especially contribute greatly to horror. OMORI is not a true horror game by any means, but I don't think I need to explain why music and color are so useful to horror games. However, interactivity is king. Horror games are popular for that reason. Though RPG Maker is limited, it can still convey a lot. Games like Aoni exist for that purpose. There is a surprising amount of tension that can be created by having the player explore a world with some simple drawings and music. The key is atmosphere. There's that word again. Fear and hunger. Yume Nikki. Off. Hello, Charlotte. Hylics. These are all RPG Maker games I think of when it comes to having a rich atmosphere, especially Hylics. Black Space is the place in the OMORI for atmosphere, which I've already discussed, but I wish to emphasize the sheer variety that it has. Take note of the music, coloring, and environment during these examples, and how they make you feel. It's significant to let the player breathe and have them interpret the situation, instead of always spoon-feeding them information. There are other parts of the game which make use of the player's anticipation that something is off. When you wake up for the first time and walk downstairs, it's far longer and creepier of an approach than you'd expect. Until suddenly... In general, Omori likes to be uncanny at times. After defeating Captain Spaceboy, the world will dim and the music slows down, with your friends disappearing suddenly. This happens a couple of times throughout the game. My favorite example though would be the bathroom mirrors. It's fun to see how these change throughout the game depending on what the player does. Again, I must stress that Manga isn't completely limited in its ability to portray horror, but the game has access to music, color, and interactivity, allowing it to hit far harder. Couple that with the player-controlled silent protagonist, it's a match made in heaven that cannot be replicated in a manga. Let's recap what we learned so far. We have removed the story's ability to effectively portray a true silent protagonist. We have removed Omori's phenomenal soundtrack and the intricacies of its sound design. We have removed all color from the story, gone are its various applications and nuances. We have removed the ability to interact with and explore Omori's vast world. We have removed additional story content in order to streamline the main plot. We have removed Omori's combat, replacing it with flavorless and generic action sequences. We have removed the story's ability to build itself up properly with dialogue and gameplay, crippling its pacing. And we have removed much of the impact of Omori's horror and atmosphere. Is this the adaptation you want? Observe the sheer number of changes we must make, with the story getting weaker each time we do so.
I really admire how you stack the odds against yourself. Yeah, make things challenging.
This is not Omori, this is a SparkNotes retelling. Did you honestly think a manga could simply adapt to everything needing to be changed? No, people will love and cherish Omori, but this isn't it. But perhaps you're still not convinced. Perhaps what you need is a concrete example. After all, the manga isn't finished yet. Let's forget about Omori for a second and think about another RPG manga adaptation. Take the manga of the hugely popular JRPG Persona 5. Persona 5 is an enormous game, taking around 100 hours for a single playthrough. It features an enormous catalog of content and its own gameplay mechanics. These two games are very different, but they are both story-rich RPGs of nuanced topics. So let's take the Persona 5 manga as an example of how such a rich game can be hollowed out when forced into a medium it was not designed for. Persona 5's own silent protagonist, Joker, is unsurprisingly forced to speak in the manga. Fortunately, this is not a bad change, as unlike Sunny, Joker never needed to be silent, and the game doesn't revolve around him nearly as much as Sunny. Everything else, though, doesn't look too good. The game's music, perhaps its most famous quality, is gone. The game's iconic art style and color palette, also gone.
And it's gone!
The original game works on a calendar system, forcing the player to plan out their actions each day. This time management aspect is naturally gone along with the gameplay. The unique character choices, as well as the abundance of optional content that the Persona series is known for, is either removed entirely or awkwardly shoehorned into the main story. The main RPG combat itself is purposeless, gone is the customizability the game offers. Instead, we get to read action sequences which offer artificial tension. To keep the plot going steadily, dungeons which would take the player hours to complete have been condensed into a few minutes worth of reading, dramatically altering the pacing of the story. And lastly, the game's atmosphere is hindered greatly by the lack of music and free roaming. Now, this is not to say that Persona 5 manga doesn't have its own merits. After all, this video is about Omori, not Persona 5.
The manga Omori was controversial. Some people on Twitter started accusing the artist of—
But I do wish to demonstrate how an enormous and beloved game can be limited to such an extreme extent through a change of mediums. And that's only one example. I will say it again, the OMORI Manga is not a different way of experiencing the story, it's just worse. Well, that's the end of my argument. I have nothing more to tell you. If you've clicked on this video because of the title and thumbnail, you're free to leave now. But the video isn't over just yet. If you still have the time, I would like to talk about a few more things.
I'd like to talk to you a lot more about this. Would you be interested in reading some of my literature? No!
Something you may wonder is that if Omori was made with the conscious and very deliberate decision to be a video game and not a graphic novel as originally intended, then why the manga? Luckily, there is a useful philosophical rule for a conundrum like this, and it's known as Highland's Razor. It stipulates that never attribute to malice that which can be adequately explained by stupidity, but don't rule out malice. So, is the manga a byproduct of malice or stupidity? Both. OMOCAT is many things. A game developer, a manager, a brand, but above all else, they are an artist. Omori as a character was created during her years in college, while she studied, you guessed it, art. And how do artists make their money? They sell their artwork. If you search up OMOCAT, the first thing you'll see is her shop, and if you go to her main website, it's effectively one big art portfolio. Think about why Omori had an art exhibition in the first place. Out of context, an art gallery may be a strange place to host artwork from an indie game, but when you consider OMOCAT's background in art, it makes perfect sense. This is how OMOCAT makes her money, and this is how OMOCAT was able to garner support for her game. If you look back at Omori's oldest trailer, you'll notice that almost no gameplay is shown. It's essentially all art. In a 2014 Tokusatsu Network article, in addition to advertising her upcoming game, she, oh look, eagerly advertises her own apparel. And much like her other work, Omori is an art piece. And you know what that means?
Hello, I like money.
It's as simple as that. Omori has exploded not just as a game, but also as a brand. It's a fine addition to her collection. Considering how hard we worked to make this game, why not capitalize on it? Take for example the console re-releases. It's just the same game with a few extra stuff, but with more bugs, at a markup, and also mysteriously removed with no explanation. Now, I'm not really a merch guy, you know? But some of these prices, man, $70 for an art book, are you serious? Let me just... To make matters worse, most of Omori's audience is rather young. Combine that with a passionate fanbase, and you have the perfect recipe for a cash cow. And so goes the manga. Omori is extremely popular in Japan. I'm talking like most of the animations I can find are Japanese. And don't forget, a lot of Omori's collabs have been Japanese exclusives. After all, we've had not one, but 2 concerts in Japan. And when considering the popularity of manga, especially in its native country, it's the perfect opportunity. Now, from a business perspective, I understand OMOCAT's decision, but as a consumer, you. Don't forget the manga is only officially available in the US and Japan, even though the digital scans are so far free. And my eternal reward for helping others to see it was to get this. Okay, that's malice, but what about stupidity? OMOCAT has been infatuated with Japanese media for decades. Anime has influenced her artwork enormously, and she has no shame in admitting that. As for manga, she had a knack for drawing webcomics well before Omori. Considering OMOCAT's love for all things Japan and her past work, this is in all likelihood a dream come true for her. I, of course, still uphold this to be an unbelievably stupid decision on OMOCAT's part, as it spoils the authenticity of the game. But who am I to judge?
Money! Money!
Let's abandon our hypothetical manga and return to the real manga at hand. After all, I've been using its panels for all of this video. Since we've already established how it would always fall short of an adaptation no matter what, let's forget about the source material and judge it purely on its own merits. Currently, only 2 chapters have been released. Once this video is uploaded, there should be 3. By the time you've clicked on this video, who knows how many there will be. I can't be bothered to give a full synopsis, so I'll give a brief summary. Chapter 1 introduces us to Sunny, a scared shut-in let outside by his friend Kel. After exploring town, he has a scuffle with his childhood friend Aubrey, panics, and is led into his dream world where we get to meet all his friends. In this world, a similar looking character named Omori takes his place. His sister has also passed away and has manifested into this spooky monster. Chapter 2 continues in said dream world. Omori and Co fight a character named Boss, with Basil being dragged somewhere. Sunny wakes up and him and Kel talk to the real Basil, promising Basil to return his photo album that Aubrey had stolen. We later see Aubrey throw said photo album out. Admittedly, some of the paneling is pretty neat, and I like the mannerisms that the characters have. As for the bad stuff... My thoughts? It's just mediocre. Who would have guessed? Now I'm going to say something that may shock you. People are being too harsh. That's rich from me, I know. I've seen it all. Criticism of the pacing, art, the mishmash of the story's events. Believe me, I get it.
Let the hate flow through you.
But these are all wrong reasons to hate the manga, especially as it only has 2 chapters to work with.
Having the first Headspace arc happen in the middle of the first real world arc was a horrible choice in my opinion.
There's a problem that people have, and it's the pacing. I feel like there has to be a reason for why they're showing us the events in this way.
How can you people be so smart and yet so stupid?
I hate the manga more than anyone else, but much like a terrible car crash, I can't help but look out of curiosity. And just like a car crash, this was entirely preventable. Why are so many people disappointed? This is what you wanted, right? I understand all of this is very condescending, but you must look at the bigger picture here. The manga can never be good. You're more than welcome to rewatch this video to learn as to why. I've witnessed a few people reach enlightenment, but I wish people had realized this back in November when it mattered. I cannot wait to watch slop video essays pretending like this is actually a good idea. There's nothing wrong with being content with what you have.
Fun fact!
Believe it or not, we already have 2 Omori comics by OMOCAT. They're about the birthdays of Omori and Aubrey. I don't blame you if you're unaware of these, as they're not well advertised and they're also very short. But they're proof of concept. I hate the hyper-commercialization of this game, but if we're committed to the idea of an OMORI manga, it can potentially work with this one simple trick. Don't try to adapt the game. That's it. Instead of trying to retell the game's story and inevitably falling short, why not try to tell a different story? This is not a foreign concept. Fanfiction authors are light years ahead of the curve in this aspect, even if most of them can't write to save their lives. Because we are no longer tied to the game, suddenly manga as a medium becomes worthwhile. Think about how artistically unique an OMORI spin-off manga could be. The sky's the limit, really. Why not make Bezo the main character? Fans have been asking for a Bezo-centric story for years, and best of all, it has the potential of recontextualizing his appearance in the main story. After all, despite his importance, his screen time is fairly limited. And it's not like this wouldn't be a profitable decision. After all, Bezo is a very popular character, perhaps a little too popular for his own good. It baffles me that out of all the options we could have chosen, they picked the most boring and the most uninspired. But I don't want new content anyway, so this is fine by me. I've kicked this can down the proverbial road that is this video for a good reason, as this ties into the main thesis I'm trying to argue for. Okay, let's face it, at least when discussing the world outside Japan, anime is drastically more popular than manga. It's so popular that even Western corporate giants have started to take notice. Here's a fact. Most OMORI fans only pretend to care about the manga. What people really want is an OMORI anime.
Kawaii neko girls. Nya rar.
And I do like myself some anime. I don't think this will ever happen, and God forbid that it does. It will almost certainly be rushed and underfunded. However, the popularity of such an idea cannot be overstated. For whatever reason, people are now under the impression that since an OMORI manga now exists, an anime adaptation is now plausible. You guys do realize that not every anime is an adaptation of a manga, right? Besides, we already have the original source material, the game, so why not just cut out the middleman? Anyways, when you look at OMORI fan animations, it's easy to understand the appeal. Especially these Evangelion-style animations by Sapgoon. Great name, by the way. And make no mistake, these animations are fantastic and are able to breathe life into the story in ways RPG Maker simply can't. But just like the manga, an anime is a terrible idea that can't work by virtue of OMORI being a video game. Although an animated retelling of the story would at least now be able to take full advantage of music and color, it would now have to contend with pacing, shot composition, voice acting, animation, detailing, and plenty more. The game was not written with all this in mind. Recall every single reason I've listed as to why the manga is a bad idea. The same still applies. This is ridiculous. Look, I get it. This stuff looks cool, and it's fun to fantasize about your favorite story being told through anime. OMORI is far from unique in this regard. It's easy to get disillusioned by certain fan animations which animate a portion of the game or derive inspiration from it. And although these can look great if executed properly, we are not adapting a small segment of the game. Rather, we are adapting the whole of the game, 30 hours worth of content. Please give this careful thought and understand why the source material worked to begin with. These are two very different mediums. It's not as cool as you may think. OMORI was made to be a game. Writing a game is hard, and so is writing a manga. Fictional stories are not conceived overnight. They are built, some with years, if not decades, of work put into them. So, when a task comes to intersect these two wildly different forms of storytelling expression, you have to think about it carefully. It can be done, but it really does depend on the story you wish to tell. Games like OMORI are those which I, and many others, hold to a higher standard. It is a game that has captivated the imagination of plenty and touched the hearts of even more. But it is not magic. Like all other stories, it was carefully built to be a video game. Not a manga, not an anime, a video game. And some games can't be adapted. And when the concept itself is broken, it matters not if the manga is far from complete. Truth be told, I am disappointed. I am disappointed that people will inevitably read it instead of playing the game first. I am disappointed that people are focusing on frivolous drama. I am disappointed that people still believe it can work. And I am most disappointed of all that people overwhelmingly welcomed the manga to begin with, instead of questioning whether or not this was a good idea.
People can never be happy like we got an OMORI Manga. Can we just be happy about that?
So very disappointed. I must thank you for listening to my boring diatribe on a 3.5-year-old indie game. But, if anything, the OMORI Manga is a case study of what happens when a good game becomes a little too profitable.
What inspired you to build a second right next door to the original?
Money!
Stale and dull of all the meaning the original once had. Commercialized because people will buy it up. Just because you like a piece of art, you shouldn't automatically like all of its derivatives. You're free to like it, that's fine. But it is a soulless cash grab, undeniably so. The manga was never needed. It's not a different way to experience the story, it's just worse. If you have a friend that's interested in OMORI, do them a favor and buy them the game. I'd even suggest watching them as they play it. I can promise you they'll have a worthwhile experience. I cannot promise the same for the manga. Thanks for watching, and have a wonderful rest of your day. Bye bye.
I'm just gonna go back to being dead. See ya, chumps.